Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having me. Today, I will be presenting the hybrid integration of two-dimensional material on silicon photonics circuits. To start with, let me just activate the pointer. So the transforming industry that basically silicon photonics, they've been talking about it is, we all know that the biggest market for photonics is datacom and telecommunication. But recently we've seen like a huge interest in photonics and how they can actually do AI accelerators. And that's because of many advantages in photonics. We are talking about speed of light. So if you care about latency and bandwidth, this is the road to go actually, is photonics. Also crosstalking and the power-hungry electronics, that one of the challenges that people are looking for new solutions to adopt to be able to accelerate these technologies. And not only that, so we've seen also optical communication and how is the photonic neural network, they can actually help a lot in different fields. So, and all that established, if we look like historically speaking, how silicon photonics started, it was actually very welcomed because it can be very adaptable with the silicon technology, and you can co-package electronics and photonics in the same platform. So if we look at this wafer that I got from IMEC, however, we could see that, of course, it's adaptable, but silicon in reality is not a great photonics material. So silicon cannot generate light, modulate, and detect light. And here I'm not talking about the challenges how has been tackled, because we do have silicon modulators, but I'm talking in general from the fundamental limitation of the material. So to have a successful and efficient light generation, detection, and actually modulation, it relied on other material like 3,5 indium phosphide, and the last 15 years we have the two-dimensional materials. And this is also like has been implemented in electronics, because we could see that the time frame is going and scaling in more than Moore's, is actually requiring this channel to be more and more smaller, and you want to have more and more transistor in the same wafer. So, and that's actually when you are talking about 2 to 3 nanometer length of the channel. So we are talking about fundamental limits of the material intrinsic properties, where we could actually see that silicon under this range 2 and 3, it's actually the mobility intrinsically degrade. But if we look at the 2D materials, we see that inherently these materials, they are atomically thin with this type of mobility at the very thin regime. So inherently they are highly mobile. I'm talking in general, not targeting specifically graphene or transition metal dichlorogenide. We will go deeper in the couple of slides regarding specific material. This is from the electronic perspective, but if we look at the photonic perspective, we also have a rich library of band gap that can be implemented. So after the exfoliation of monolayer graphene, and basically it wasn't the reason that they got the Nobel Prize, definitely because of the exfoliation. It's because of the physics of graphene and the conical shape based band diagram. But after all this extraordinary kind of properties that has been shown, there was an astronomical number of 2D materials. Every day, like we hear like a new 2D materials coming. And we could see that these are actually rich library of band gap, from semi-metallic to insulation to even semiconductors. And we see the number of publication is actually growing with number of years. So we could see that this is actually become like a very, very hot topic. However, what are 2D materials good for? Is it just good for publication, or we can actually have them in real application? So we could see that it's been invested in different application in touch screen, foldable electronics, or wearable electronics like graphene tattoos and others. There are many companies, they actually have also hydrophobic, hydrophilic fibers based on graphite and the graphene. Many other applications in solar cells. Today, I will be focusing on high-speed implementation of these materials and how they are actually can have a new functionalities on chip. So as I mentioned before, 2D materials, they give you like a rich library of band gaps. So depends on what you want to do, and then you can actually engineer the material at different application level. So here are a few examples of how this 2D material has been implemented to functionalize photonic chips. So basically, we could see that here we have a ring resonator, and they integrated a double split graphene photodetector, which is based on photothermal effect. And here, like we have a phase shifters, we have electro-absorption modulators. We also can have a heterostructure with other 2D materials to do much better photodetections with the graphene. And also like many other phase modulation, plasmonics, graphene modulators, and they are reaching also something which has been achieved by the three-dimensional semiconductor in terms of speed. So, but the starting point of any understanding is to be able to understand how to extract the optical parameters of this material, because this is the starting point to understand the light-matter interaction. Because if you do not understand how the light interact with the material, so basically you would not be able to engineer these materials to get the best out of it. So you need to harvest the best absorption, you will want to reduce the losses. So it's all starting by knowing the optical parameters of this material. So we've been lucky to have this system from Acreon that basically we managed to extract the optical parameter based on the complex refraction coefficient, then do fitting by knowing some simple physics about the material, semiconducting or metallic, to know the model that we could fit to it. So we managed to have like the optical properties of different exotic material. And knowing these optical properties will actually allow us to design our problem in very good way by feeding this optical parameter to a simulation kit like numerical. So you can do a slot waveguides, you can actually do silicon nitride, so you can understand the effective index of refraction distribution and understand the light-matter interaction. Depends on what you want to do in terms of application. In a couple of slides, I will just talk about the application that we started doing this, designed the problem, and then we actually defined the application. So before that, I just want to say that based on the fabrication, so no one or no foundry will get your chips and accept to integrate these 2D materials on the top. So what we do is actually we do back-end kind of process where we design and we send the chips to be acceptable to a post-processing in our labs later on. So we do not interfere with the front end, and we do like stamping and kind of microtransfer printing technology, but it's more of stamping of these 2D materials at the back end. And this is what I call deterministic transfer, because you really need to transfer these 2D material onto the photonic chip in a very precise manner, because these are uncladded chips, and when you have like materials that is scattered everywhere, so basically you wouldn't be able to see them. They will create lots of losses, and that's why basically we need to have a deterministic where it should lay between the electrode, and that's where it should have the active layer. So you define the active layer by defining where is the region of interest that you really want to do. And I call this as a deterministic transfer process. And you could see here, it's very clean transfer process that we manage to transfer on silicon waveguide. And this is one of the examples on germanium phosphide materials for optical detection. I will start with a couple of examples that are targeting different functionality, depends on the properties that this material can be actually useful for. The first thing is the anisotropy of this material. This material, they have a great anisotropy and in-plane anisotropy. When we talk about the optical in-plane anisotropy, so basically the crystallographic orientation has different absorption, depends on the orientation of this crystal. So we stamped this material onto 4-wave guide crossing, and you could see that depends on the crystallographic orientation of this material, you can channel the light differently. So you can attenuate the light in a different way just by rotating this flake because of the absorption-dependent crystallographic orientation dependency. And this is very useful because basically using the same material, you can pass the light in different channels, but it attenuates at the output differently. So it acts like an optical density filter that can basically attenuate the light, depends on how much. So we have a maximum value, we have a minimum value, and values in between depends on the angle that we designed our 4-wave guide crossing. But the idea was to understand the in-plane optical anisotropy of this material. The second application, which is actually now viral for phase shifting, that it's actually a fundamental element for linear weight in photonic neural network. Also, if you want to add nonlinearity by going to the nonlinear regime of this ferroelectric material, so you can, so these are the hardcore of the matrix multiplication in AI, where basically you want to electro-optically tune this material precisely in phase without losing the signal. And this is what we've been actually doing here using CCPS material, which is multiferroic material. So you can tune the index of refraction, and we present this on ring resonator and also in interferometer structure like MZIs. Other than that, the same material is ferromagnet and anti-ferromagnet, paramagnet at room temperature, where you can actually also tune the index of refraction by magneto-optic properties of this material. And for this specific application, we use it as optical isolator, which is a very vital element in photonics, because when you have an integrated laser, you always have a back reflection that can add to the signal noise and can damage the laser. So you want to prevent the back reflection by having a straightforward laser going on without having a back reflection. So basically, this is what this element can do. It's just preventing the back reflection by having a non-reciprocal kind of performance. The other thing, they can actually also work as a polarization element, where we demonstrated this in ring resonator and also in straight wave guide. So you could see that on ring resonator, because of the polarization dependent mode geometrical aspect, so you can have a transfer magnet all pass filter and preventing all the transfers electric and attenuating it. So it's a polarization dependency between the two perpendicular polarization inside the chip, because we have a quasi-TE and the quasi-TM. When we integrated in a straight wave guide to demonstrate the capability of rotation of this material, depends on how much you integrate of this material, how you basically tackle the problem of the interfaces, then you can go from TE to TM, TM to TE, and this is actually tunable. The last thing that I want to say is the capability of this material to be a broadband detection. And this is very also vital application, because we always lack a very high detectivity and high sensitivity material in mid-infrared range, which is actually that this material, they can be of great interest for broadband cameras, thermal imaging, medical imaging, also like, for surveillance. So we had some preliminary result on germanium arsenide because of the high Seebeck coefficient. So it's uncooled kind of mid-infrared detectors that can work in 8.5 micron. So this is just like ongoing research on mid-infrared. And my conclusion is just like these materials hold lots of promise for adding functionality on the chip. And not as actually, we have a prototype here that they are very easy to integrate. We are not interfering with the front end. We are not talking to industry to adopt this material. It's just like you have the front end, and then you add, pick and match these active layers and adding functionalities on the chip. And I have presented different examples on that sense, and from optical power density, or like, electro-optic absorption because of this multiferroic new class of 2D materials, and also the capability to do polarization control on chip. So with that, I would like to thank you all for your attention, and I'm happy to take any question.